All right. Hello, friends. It's so nice to see all of you again. I'm Carmen Mazzara, your intrepid executive director here at the Coalition for American Public Diplomacy and Leadership. I'm so pleased to see all of you for another one of our Making the Case for BridgeUSA webinars. And we have a great session here today with two amazing speakers who are going to talk about how BridgeUSA relates to public diplomacy and why public diplomacy is a key piece of advancing national interests. I want to invite all of you as we go. If you have any questions that you desperately want to make sure we cover, please put those in the chat. You're also free to just send them directly to me as a message. And once our panelists are done speaking, we'll have a chance to explore some of your questions. If you did submit a question in advance, I do have that as well. And we'll go to try to make sure the conversation covers all the things you'd like to talk about. I do want to put in a couple of quick commercials. After this amazing session, we'll have a recording up on YouTube. And as always, some of our key takeaways that live in the Capital member folder. We have another great session coming up on April 15th, looking at how we can prepare for the 2025 summer work travel season. On April 30th, we're talking about how we can build the alumni presence in different countries, and we'll have some great Capital members sharing their wisdom and doing a great case study there. And then in May, we're looking at how BridgeUSA connects to US national security. So lots of great ways to look at how these transformative, powerful programs advance key interests while delivering such great benefits for the participants themselves. So to jump into our conversation here today, I'm very excited to be joined by two wonderful speakers. Paulina Ávila is the president and CEO of AIESecUSA, which many of you may know is a global youth-led organization that provides volunteer and internship exchange opportunities to develop future leaders. And we'll have a great chance to talk about why that's so important in a minute. She was born in Mexico, but raised between the US and Mexico, and really has that multicultural perspective that she's able to contribute to all of the great work that AIESEC does. And through AIESEC's partnership with BridgeUSA, she talks about how they can create a transformative exchange opportunity that really empowers young people while supporting US public diplomacy interests. So we're very excited to have her. And then as her co-panelist, a longtime colleague of mine, Tara Sonenshine, who is currently a senior fellow at the Tufts University Fletcher School and is, among other many distinctions, the former US Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. She joined Tufts in 2002, as the Edward R. Murrow Professor of Practice after a long career in international broadcasting at ABC News, and you can see some of her amazing Emmys behind her in the shot. She worked also as a reporter at the Pentagon for ABC World News Tonight, and those Emmys that you see behind her are some of the 10 that she's actually secured for her work in the news. You'll also find her writings in lots of different outlets, and she has some new pieces out, both about reflecting on the work of the U.S. Institute for Peace, where she was a staff member for a long time, as well as the critical role of compassion in our society. So I think that it's wonderful that she's able to work still on some key policy issues, as well as these bigger ideas that are so important going forward. During the Bill Clinton administration, she had a number of roles in the White House, including time at the National Security Council, as well as I said, Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs. She has also served in key roles at the U.S. Institute for Peace, the International Crisis Group, the American Academy of Diplomacy, CARE, Brookings, and so many other great organizations. But as a complement to that, she's actually also a teacher and a professor. So I came to know Tara through her work at the George Washington University, particularly the Elliott School, but now at Fletcher, she's really involved in engaging young people in these key topics. And so I'm so excited to have two folks who are really on the front lines working with young people to help move these key ideas forward. Again, I invite you as we go forward, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But I get the privilege of the first question. So Tara, I'm going to start with you. How do short-term exchange programs like BridgeUSA shape perceptions of the United States? And why do we care how the United States is perceived?
Well, thank you first, Carmen, and to my co-panelist, Paulina. I see an old friend and colleague, Rick Ruth, on, and it's very exciting to see the community of people who care deeply about exchanges. So let's start with short term exchanges. And I always begin by reminding human beings that we are human beings, we are people. Everyone on this call is an individual with ideas and values and hopes and dreams and aspirations. And at times in our world, and times in our political life, we can feel very isolated from each other. We can feel uncertain, unsure, alone. We can feel like there's distance between us. And when that happens, if you imagine two islands and people are separated and feeling like they can't reach across the divide, what usually happens is someone constructs a bridge, a physical bridge. Right now in Maryland, it's been 1 year since a bridge collapsed and took lives. And so bridges, and why I was so eager to be part of this program, is that bridges are important metaphorically and they're important in so many ways. A short-term bridge, a short-term hop is sometimes the only way that we're going to get people together. Economically, short-term exchanges are often less of a commitment, less expensive, and they're very immersive at the same time. So you think about a season of the year and a short-term summer program. You think about the intensity of a host family. You think about how you want to pack so much in to a short-term exchange so that it can yield maximal results. So I think on the spectrum of public diplomacy, we always have even immediate interactions, short-term interactions, mid-term, and long-term. And they're all vital to this bridge building where people impact each other and find ways to cross those big divides in language, perspective, diversity of opinions. And so I'll turn it to Paulina for her view, but that's my initial take on the reason we're so eager to make sure, even if it's short term, and to look at the advantages of it.
Thank you, Tara. I couldn't agree more. I apologize. Also, sorry for my voice. I'm a little sick, but I hope you can all understand. I could not agree more. Definitely, for example, for us through AIESEC, we believe that exchanges will get us closer to achieving peace and fulfillment of humankind's potential. It is through these exchanges that we are able to see how that cross-cultural understanding happens, right? When we have people from other countries coming into the United States and living with the host family, understanding, getting immersed more on the American culture, then they're able to go back to their home countries and understand really what it means to be part of the US culture. I think it's really, these type of programs are really important for the country because it allows us to, like Tara was saying, bridge to have that from that starting point to the end point, bridge connecting from more of a place of understanding. So definitely it is a matter of perspective on how we can collaborate together because it's something really, really important for public diplomacy in the country.
And Paulina, to build on that a little bit, you've talked about how this shapes participants' views of the United States. Could you talk a little bit about how it might contribute to Americans' understanding of the US place in the world? And then Tara, we'll turn it to you.
Yes, of course. Every time that we have, students, young people from other parts of the world, and they come in and they engage and interact with Americans, they're able to understand life and cultures beyond the US. They're able to understand and have a deeper appreciation for other types of cultures, for other types of views, and able to shape a little bit of their perspective on how they see the world. So I think it's really important how Americans are able I'd say to go out of their bubble, to understand more of what is beyond the US, have more of an understanding of other countries, of other types of cultures that again align with AIESEC's mission to achieve peace and fulfillment of humankind's potential through the understanding of different cultures.
And I would jump in on that also, Carmen, to reflect on the first part of your first question, which is about what's the difference and about image and perception. And I think people should understand that when you come to things like narrative, perception, storytelling, they often don't feel as concrete, if you will, as reality. We often have this tension between soft power and hard power because I can go and hug a tank and feel it, but how do I feel soft power and narratives and stories? And I would refer you all to one of the great scholars of our field, Nicholas Cull, who has a book out and articles about what he calls reputational security. And that is really about image and, in his mind, how even foreign policy, which you'll be discussing later in the month, is linked to the reputation that a nation has, how it projects its values and interests. And that when your reputation is undermined, you often have negative narratives that develop. And this is something that we know Farah Pandith and others have explored. When narratives become negative and ugly and rhetoric becomes difficult, that's where you get extremism, that's where you get conflict, that's where you get violence. So I never want to lose sight of some of the less tangible parts of a nation and its people. And when they come together through short-term programs, they deal with that stranger anxiety, they deal with that looming hostility that comes from not understanding the other. And despite uncertainty about all this, this is very basic. Everyone on this call understands the basic humanity that comes into play when you're talking about a nation, which is a collection of individuals. It's not some freestanding object. And so I hope that addresses a little bit these perception issues.
Kara, I'm going to ask you to build on that because I think a lot of people assume that reputation, the ability to hug a human and not a tank, which I advise against, obviously, that it's not as important. And it doesn't matter and doesn't have real implications for prosperity or national security or the success of a society. Could you talk a little bit more about why those ideas about a country are important and what they can mean for vital interests?
So, the way to unpack this notion of why these somewhat harder to quantify pieces like short term exchanges, like bridges, matter is to start with young people. And young can be defined differently. The UN figures show there are 1.2 billion people in the world today, ages 15 to 24. There are also last year figures that if you were to lower that to 10 to 24, that's 16% of the world, about 1.8 billion people. So as we continue to see this rise in the number of young people, we know I specifically am working on Africa and soft power, where 40% of that continent's population is going to be under 15. These are formative years where a summer experience, a semester, a camp between Palestinians and Israelis, Ukrainians, Russians, summer camps, these are the building blocks of what will be down the road for them leadership moments, opportunities to shape economies, opportunities to resolve disputes, opportunities to address sustainability and critical goals. So, how people interact, how their relationships grow to be constructive or destructive, peaceful or violent, is really going to determine the contours of the rest of the 8 billion people. And so, until we unpack this seriously and break it down into things we can understand, then things like Mexico and the US and what Paulina is doing become understandable as the piece of a whole.
Sarah, I could not agree more with what you're saying. Isaac's demographic is the youth, precisely because the youth are the ones that can make the change, right? As Isaac, we believe that it is young people that can have the skills, the knowledge, the know-how on the things that they need to do different in order to shape the world. Like Tara was saying, right? The young people get the opportunity to shape how the conflicts are being handled, to put in their perspective of the world that we want to see. And I include myself in that group because I'm 29 years old. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I include myself in that group because we as young people, we want to see a different world. We want to see a world that is more peaceful, where there's more understanding, so that we can be much more closer to having a world with peace. I don't know if that will ever be achievable, but I like to believe so. And I think what Tara is saying, on the importance of being young people. Just as I say, globally, we work with over 30,000 young people, and that is just a fraction of the global youth population. And when we work with these youth, that we're able to bring to the US, for them to bring their global perspective, I think it shapes the narrative of the future that we want to see.
Paulina, I want to build on that because there are lots of ways that young people get information. Virtual experiences, games, US movies, books, all of these different components that young people around the world may think they come to understand the US. How does the interpersonal element of Bridge USA do something differently or deliver something differently than playing Fortnite with your friends from around the globe?
So we
It's
have
as
some,
easy.
yeah, go ahead, Paulina. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tara. I was gonna say it's as easy as being the immersion, the physical part of doing it, right? It's not the same as having these experiences virtually, as the way we see this, but it's being actually engaged physically on this immersion. It's understanding. It's an experiential learning, right? When you live, work, lead in a foreign environment, that's where the real change happens, because you're truly immersed on the reality of this foreign environment to you. So this is the key factor that allows young people to shape the results. So definitely it's the experiential learning that you have through an exchange, through being in person in these experiences.
And I would only add, Carmen, that we've um, lost sight. There was some MIT research in the early days of in-person exchanges before things were Zoom based, or even before AI, that showed there were actually physical changes in the brain that happened when people were in the same place. And it's as easy as saying, imagining each of you when you laugh together with people, as opposed to watching a video or just listening to music, when you're in the room and around the table, when you're sharing a meal, when you are toasting your glasses. I don't think any of us would say they're quite the same as walking on a beach with somebody. You can look at the background of a beach, but how many of us feel differently when you're sitting together looking at the water, or just, as I say, having a dinner together? I think we have to remind people of just the human value of that.
And I also appreciate with Bridge USA programs that a lot of it is working collaboratively to achieve a goal. If there's a work and a cultural exchange element, you have to collaborate to make sure there's safety in your amusement park, or to deliver on a project in your office, or to do a team project in a high school. So there's a nice pull together element in addition to the everyday human laughter and mealtime and those kind of components to it. So to me, that's the great duality of Bridge USA as well. And I'm curious, again, do you feel like these exchanges shape the way that coworkers, fellow students who are based in the US think about the role of the United States in the world? Think about international engagement. Think about the rest of that the rest of the world is out there. As a big country, I think sometimes the US has the chance to look at itself, but doesn't necessarily think about all of the folks beyond their own borders. You're both nodding, so I'm going to start with Tara since Paulina started first.
Well, you mentioned the word goal in the follow-up before this question, and I think we should spend a moment on what's the goal of an American getting involved in any of this and finding their place in the global orbit. I think there are a couple of goals that these programs have and fulfill. One is an appreciation of ourselves and our place in on the planet. And to appreciate ourselves and our place, we need cultural competence, we need knowledge, we need comfort with others, we need the economic improvement in our lives that comes from being economically interconnected. We need a broad understanding of others if we're going to get over narrow bigotry, which I think holds us back. If we want trust in ourselves, and how are we going to trust others? And the last goal is adaptability and flexibility. I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, adapt or die. How are we going to adapt if we're not challenged by others and not in a situation where our colleagues, our coworkers, where we have to be slightly flexible because we're not all clones of each other. And any relationship, whether it's a relationship with a friend, a partner, a professor, a colleague, it's all built on this fundamental notion of trust. And these exchange programs build trust.
I could not agree more with Tara. When you ask, do exchanges shape the way people of the US find themselves in the world? Definitely. It is more than just understanding. It is immersion. Like I was saying with the past question interaction, it is when they're living in with the host families, when they're collaborating with the American workplaces. Tara was talking about connections and knowledge and cultural context, appreciation of ourselves in the planet. When young students come to the US and are able to engage with local communities, and the power of exchanges just provides a more authentic perspective of the US, being able to see that there is a world out there that is not just the US, and the other way around, right? For people that are able to come to the US as well. It's these human interactions that build the lasting connections and allow us to challenge these stereotypes around the world.
I love that. And for those of you who joined us on our previous Making the Case webinar that was specifically about economic prosperity, a lot of the words that we've just used, adaptability, flexibility, authenticity, those are came out in that session as really practical workforce skills and life skills. So there's the human element to it as well as the professional development to element to it, as Tara was talking. I'm going to open the floor up in just a few minutes, folks, so get your fingers ready to type and we'll go from there. But the final piece before we open the floor up that I'd like ask each of you to touch on is whether there's something distinct about BridgeUSA in its elements of exchange and work or exchange and study and its short-term focus, its openness. I'm leading you here in case you couldn't tell, that you feel like really delivers in a different way than other public diplomacy programs that the United States might offer or that other countries might offer. And Tara, I'm going to start with you.
So I think public diplomacy and soft power span so many different programs. I guess what I like about this one is its concreteness and its ability to sort of hold it in your hands, that you can touch and feel it and you can measure its impact. It's very hard over the long term. And we all understand the importance of M&E and seeing the results of things. And we understand that if you really brought this out over a long period of time, you might end up looking at Nobel Peace Prize winners and seeing that they had exposure to exchange programs. But we are in a quick world. We're in a world where you need short-term gains, where you need concrete data, and where you're able to just get your arms around something. And I think that's some of the value of your programs.
Yes, definitely. And to build up on what Tara was saying, I believe exchange programs like AIESEC, like BridgeUSA, they give young people those first-hand experiences of being able to be part of different cultures. And I see it as CEO of AIESEC US. I see how these international participants are able to form their perceptions of the country, not just from the mere narratives, but actually from working alongside Americans in real world settings, in different environments. So I truly believe that these experiences reinforce that in public diplomacy, it's important to understand how countries are so diverse, dynamic, and driven by connection, innovation, in order to shape our future young leaders.
Thank you both. All right, friends and colleagues, now is your time. I do have a few questions already that folks have sent me. Thank you. And feel free to put them in the chat or direct message them to me. And we'll have a little bit of a window for you all to draw out even more wisdom from our great speakers. Our first question that came through was how each of you might see BridgeUSA evolving in the next 5 years, particularly as the world changes around us. And Paulina, I'm going to start with you. I know that BridgeUSA, the work that you all do is one piece of AIESEC's work, but how do you see it changing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So right now, definitely, I see more immersion in different industries, right? We talked earlier about artificial intelligence being growing more, but also there's emerging industries. We're talking about sustainability, entrepreneurship, digital economy, all these new sectors that are really important for the younger generations. And I think they're not only young generations, but they are also global priorities. So definitely I see BridgeUSA program evolving as sort of a platform to upskill those leadership development components, so that participants can return home just with skills that enhance those long-term effects and career prospects.
I would agree on the widening of sectors. I would also say that more countries are going to come into play. Certainly on the African continent, there's a new soft power diplomacy effort, not just in South Africa, but in the other 48 countries where we may have been somewhat underutilizing the capacity of short-term exchange. I do also think we're going to come to evaluate education differently in the years ahead, and the whole shift in what's affordable and what is manageable for high schools, colleges, universities, community colleges. So I think we're going to have to be shifting and thinking about how we learn, where ChatGPT is taking us, where AI is taking us, but fundamentally what our norms and values are going to be and how that will shape both perception and reality when it comes to exchange programs.
Thank you both. So the next question I have is from someone who works very much on the local level. And we've talked a lot about kind of big ideas about US interests, but could each of you speak a little bit about what this might mean in a community in a different part of the US, in Utah, in New Jersey, in Florida, and how this might help that piece of the broader US, with its public diplomacy or perception goals?
Paulina,
Tara, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. I just wrote about an index that was done by the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was, an unlikely place to see this done, but they looked at 12 pilot cities in the US to see what was happening to community spirit, community engagement, local engagement. And I wrote about it for an outlet called The Conversation, and I hope people look it up. What they really found on the local level was the perception of America as a compassionate country, that with the tension of wondering if we really are still compassionate. And it's turns out that people want to be locally engaged. They want to be generous. They want to be charitable. They want a civic minded community. But they're struggling in what the tools for that are, what the investment is needed by local and city government to achieve this kind of civic minded community. And why did they want a civic minded community? Because it turned out that their mental health and their personal well-being and their employment opportunity and their educational accessibility were all enhanced if the community was working together and exchanging ideas and resources. So I was very taken with what that Muhammad Ali study found. But Paulina?
Yes, I just second Tara's perspective. I believe when it comes to smaller communities or those not so industrialized parts of the country, I think it even helps to shape even more because I believe they sometimes it's areas that may feel so isolated and not having this understanding or perception of what is beyond. So being able to take part in these exchanges and programs like BridgeUSA allows for that collaboration and that knowledge and know-how of what is beyond, what is the role of young people, what is the role as Americans, as foreigners in the US to be able to be part of this and push for more public diplomacy.
I love that. BridgeUSA as an opportunity to bring a community together to deliver on all of those great results that each of you talked about. Looking back at the questions that folks have sent me, there's one that stands out, which is we've talked a lot on this call about the positive perceptions of the US that come from BridgeUSA encounters. And I'm curious, based on the question that I got, when the perceptions are less positive, is there an opportunity for BridgeUSA to address misunderstandings, misperceptions of the US, other narratives that people are being fed? And Tara, again, since you're the most active nodder I have, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I have been studying this very question, and I'll give you a couple of data points. Young people, according to the Harvard Youth Poll of 2024, so very recent, are dubious that the American dream is in reach for them. And the American dream has always been defined differently for individuals, but something very common to young people and all people who have a dream of what it is they want in terms of their individual personal freedom, prosperity. And I went further into the Harvard Youth poll and was perturbed that there are more young people saying they're not extremely proud of America right now. And they feel slightly alienated and they feel less compassionate right now. And that if you feel you're in a crisis of any kind, you're not as understanding of the other at that point. You're under stress. And it's very hard to build those networks and partnerships when you feel you have to make up for some loss. Now, some of this I think is post-pandemic. I think we lose sight of what the pandemic did to us in terms of isolation, in terms of mental health, in terms of reading and scores, and in terms of just our human networks. And there's a kind of hangover from that that also feeds into this sense that people have that they're still making up for lost time. And so I think that's very real. I won't get into now the effects this has on tourism and trade and people going overseas and how they feel about representing their country, how people feel about coming here. The tourism is down. I don't think we should lie to ourselves. This summer, we are not going to see as many people in our national parks as we did the past year. And we have to ask ourselves what that is about. Our crime and our sense of hostility has also driven some people away, fearing that this is not the safe and secure, welcoming, beckoning place it was. And I just don't think we can sugarcoat that. Paulina?
Yes, from my side, I agree completely with Tara's perception, and to build up on that, I believe that the fault of one is not necessarily the fault of everyone, or should not represent everyone. And I believe that we're at this point in history where we even need to connect more with the people. We were talking earlier in one of the earlier questions to get to know the humans behind the experiences. And I think it's about that. It's being able to through exchanges, being able to get to know the people, values, the opportunities, connect on a deeper understanding. People being able to meet real people, Americans in diverse environments, experience everyday life, that allow to build trust and long relationships that don't necessarily reflect the perception that everyone has. Because I think exchanges provide a counter narrative of what is being told by social media, by current context. So I believe, I'm a true believer, that exchanges are what can shape the future of our world.
I think that's a great point, Paulina, and a great thing that our colleagues outside the US can say to someone who might be skeptical about coming to the United States. Come and see if you're right, see what might be different than the way you assume that it is, and learn. And again, maybe some things are confirmed and some things are not, but it's important to have that firsthand knowledge for yourself and not just sort of filter it through social media and other places. So we're almost at time, friends. I do invite anybody else who'd like to send a question directly to me or put it more publicly in the chat. Before we sign off, I will have a quick poll, but I want to end with one final question, which is, our colleagues here are working on the hyperlocal level, they're working on the broader US level, they're working outside the US in lots of different countries. Would each of you share why you think BridgeUSA specifically is an important thing for them to continue to share with their communities, and how that helps in a clear and concrete way move forward all of these values that we care about? And Paulina, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, of course. And definitely the answer is because Bridge And going back to how we started the conversation with Tara, I'm talking about bridges, right? It's what connects one thing to our final destination, and hopefully like a better ending. And Bridge USA allows us to, through exchanges, being able to allow for young people to immerse in different cultures, to be able to understand other perspectives, other ways of living, other thoughts and perceptions, that when they come back home, whether Americans on the outside or outside in the United States, are able to shape the narrative that they have of the world, and challenge themselves for the context and knowledge that they have.
So I would say Bridge USA programs are foundational and formative and fun. And we're getting to summer, and it's a lighter season where we shouldn't forget that some of this is about the joy of exchange. And the last things to remember are that communicating and being culturally immersed give you networks. They're communications tools that leave you where I said at the beginning you don't want to be: isolated, alone, without a connection, without a bridge to the other side. Because this is, again, where institutions, organizations can help, but it's the human beings that drive these connections, that build these bridges, and that come back to report the success of these programs. And we need to celebrate the success of these programs and to drive them forward with energy and purpose.
And that is what Capital is all about. So thank you both so much. I'm glad that we ended on the joy and the fun of these programs, because I think that is something when we're so practical we often lose. I want to thank our speakers, and I want to ask our attendees quite quickly if you would please do a very quick two-person poll to let us know how we did. I want to thank our speakers, thank all of our wonderful audience from around the world, and put in two, again, quick commercials. I hope we'll see you on April 15th for our look at getting ready for the summer work travel specifically season. And then I hope we'll see you on April 30th for our look at building alumni communities and alumni connections. And then in May, we'll touch again on this making the case issue and how we can really tell the story of Bridge USA, particularly its relationship to national security. So lots of great ways to learn and connect and continue to put forward the importance of these programs and what they really mean for the US, for its interests, as well as for our wonderful participants. So thank you all so much for being with us today. Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, Tara. Really appreciate all the great wisdom that you shared. And I look forward to seeing everybody at a future Capital webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.